So at July 29 of 2005, in a frontal accident in her 2005 Chevrolet Cobalt, Amber Mary Rose, at the age of 16, had died, which is the first death due to faulty switches. A contractor hired by the NHTSA discovered that the ignition of the Cobalt had shifted out of the run position and into the accessory position, cutting off steering, brake, and airbag control of the vehicle. At April 2013, General Motors is shown proof that DeGiorgia changed the switch configuration during deposition in a wrongful death cases in Georgia. General Motors engineers eventually reported in November that the design had been modified. Lastly, at August 2015, attorney Keenish Feinberg, who operates the compensation fund for General Motors, claims 124 deaths and 275 injuries were due to the ignition switches. Families of those have died will also earn at least $1 million, and for compensation, General Motors had set aside $625 million. So at July 29 of 2005, in a frontal accident in her 2005 Chevrolet Cobalt, Amber Mary Rose, at the age of 16, had died, which is the first death due to faulty switches. A contractor hired by the NHTSA discovered that the ignition of the Cobalt had shifted out of the run position and into the accessory position, cutting off steering, brake, and airbag control of the vehicle. At April 2013, General Motors is shown proof that DeGiorgia changed the switch configuration during deposition in a wrongful death cases in Georgia. General Motors engineers eventually reported in November that the design had been modified. Lastly, at August 2015, attorney Keenish Feinberg, who operates the compensation fund for General Motors, claims 124 deaths and 275 injuries were due to the ignition switches. Families of those have died will also earn at least $1 million, and for compensation, General Motors had set aside $625 million.
I would like to mention 5 challenges that GM company faced. The first thing was unemployment. When the company went bankrupt, more than 1,000 workers will lose their jobs. That's why US government bought the company to prevent this catastrophe. The other problem was internal communication. The company was made from several committees and they announced different solutions which make the consumer dissatisfied, and this comes from weak internal communication. The other challenge I would like to mention, it is charges. The company was charged more than $35 million because they knew about faulty ignition switches. In addition, they fined $120 million for the damage they caused. The other thing, GM is a rich organization and it can handle the priceless short-term costs. But they have a bigger problem such as losing shareholders and customers, which has long-term effect. The solution was social media. They use social media to represent their company, which they made it better. And they use the other thing was they use social media to keep in touch with their customers to find out their problems.
General Motors is unethical because as a leader in the auto industry, they failed to act with honesty. The engineers knew about the faulty switch at least in 2004, but they failed to address it until 2006. Knowing that the cars had problems, GM did not recall the cars until 2014, nearly 10 years after they discovered the issue. The company was concerned with maximizing the overall profit. They did not consider how the lives of their stakeholders could be affected. The deaths and injuries of almost 400 people and counting is much worse than the company maximizing their profit.
Marity Bora becomes CEO of the GM company in 2013, and she was the first leader of the auto manufacturer in the world. The first thing she's done was fired 15 employees who was responsible for faulty ignition switches. Instead of covering the fault, she gave priority to it and treated with the urgency. And she tried to deal with this.
Well, Mary Barra had to choose between recalling the cars and losing $2.3 million and saving many more lives by the ignition switch defect, or leave it be and deceive the stakeholders and customers that everything is fine. Mary Barra in a situation that if she chooses to save money and delay a recall, then she and GM as a whole might be responsible for even more deaths regarding the ignition switch, and also violate federal laws by neglecting a recall when it should have recalled as soon as the problem was noticed.
Alternative options. General Motors could have easily avoided this situation, as they could have stepped up when the company saw the problems of the ignition switch that caused many deaths and injuries. General Motors waited too long to resolve the issue even while knowing how important a car company can hold on a person. Since they failed to recall early, they had to pay around $900 million of settlement and also millions of dollars in fees that GM had to pay during the trial. Mary Barra should have definitely recalled as soon as they figured out it was going to be a problem, and now must deal with the consequence for having General Motors pay more than they should have, and also dealing with violated laws. Preferred ethical option for the actor. Well, if I was Mari Barra, I would choose using Kantianism, as it views lying, cheating, and stealing to be wrong, even if there are no positive outcomes. This philosophy would be best to follow for the customers, as you must act with honesty and to be trustworthy. If she had acted on the philosophy of Kantianism, then she wouldn't have ruined millions of people's trust for General Motors, as it led to 124 deaths and at least 275 injuries. If GM didn't manipulate everyone, then their reputation wouldn't have gone down as it did, and their economy and profits would have been larger on top of that. They had to pay even more by delaying the recall, as opposed to recalling it as soon as possible. In all, by being the leader of GM and following the philosophy of Kantianism, GM would be in a much better state than it is now.